because the property manager is like the quarterback. You got to make sure you got the right property manager managing your property. Now we screen them, and it's like an interview. Now people think that's crazy, but I want to make sure that the property manager is going to look after the property.
We believe every Australian deserves a right to own at the very least 5 investment properties. I'm Adrian Trimboli.
And I'm Frank and Adrian, and welcome to the Invest in You podcast.
Once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. Ralph Emerson. Mr. Frank, welcome. That is a beautiful way to start off today's podcast. Okay. This is something that I've had a belief of, and I mean, I've realized that this is more and more true as I go through life and as I go through challenges, or I even just make a decision. Once the decision is made, whether it's right or wrong at the time, you are the only person who's going to make it work. And I've always been of the belief, whether I say it to others, where I think of it myself, once that decision is made, the universe will work itself out around that decision. Now, you can talk about anything. You can talk about starting a business or staying in your job. You can talk about staying with the spouse or going another way. Whatever way you choose, you have the power to make that work, and the universe, generally speaking, will conspire to either make that happen, to either work for you or not work for you. Great little touch off with some Ralph Emerson, which kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today. But also it is something that we spoke about last week, hence why I wanted to raise it for this topic. And then the topic today, if you want to introduce the topic, and welcome, of course.
Welcome, people. So the topic of today is the first step to take. Now, we've got 6 steps here today that we're going to discuss to help you become a better property investor. So what you need to do moving forward. Now, with the first step, we're going to talk about the strategy you must follow. So the very first step, you actually have to listen to last week's episode. Okay, go back, watch or listen to last week's episode. It's going to give you the first step that you need to take. Okay, moving forward. Now, do you want to recap, Age, a bit about that step, or do you want to just jump straight into number 2 and make the viewers, I guess, go back and listen to that very first one?
Well, I'll do the double here. Go back and listen to it, but I want to kind of just summarize exactly what we did chat about in that strategy must follow session. First things first is you must have an actual strategy in place. Okay. You need to know exactly what you are targeting. So what strategy, when I say strategy, what do I mean? Are you going to go down the route of purchasing 50 apartments in the next 10 years? Are you going to go and purchase properties at $1 million, which are going to be negatively geared? Are you going to go purchase duplexes, triplexes, and only that? Or have you got another strategy? Whatever the strategy is, you must have that strategy in place. You need to know not only what are you purchasing now, what are you going to be purchasing for your second, your third, your fourth? What's the end goal? Are you going to try and replace your income? You're going to try and get to an overall net value, overall asset value. You need to have a strategy, and you need to be able to stick by that strategy. Know when you're going to be purchasing the first asset, the second asset, the third asset. That is absolutely the most important thing to do prior to even thinking about your borrowing capacity, prior to even thinking about, what's a nice suburb. You must do that. And then after that, the goal or what you should be focusing on is, okay, let's get our finance in order, and then let's think about property. So that's the first step. Go on to number 2, please, Frank.
Sure, perfect. I just wanted to touch there. A good quote is a goal without a plan is just a dream. So you need to have that strategy in place to know where you're going. 2 is team. So there's no I in team. So the most successful entrepreneurs or athletes or celebrities in the world, they all had people around them to help them to get them where they are today. So when it comes to property investing, it's very simple. You need a buyer's agent. You need a mortgage broker. You need a solicitor, a pest and building specialist, a depreciation specialist, an accountant that's going to help you put the right strategic plan in place when it comes to doing your tax, and a property manager, which is vital when it comes to building a property portfolio. So these things are something that you need when you're building a property portfolio, and you can't try to do these things, all these things yourself. Okay. Now we might be good in one or two areas when it comes to building a property portfolio, but when it comes to majority of the whole due diligence, you need a team. Now, why? Because they fast track everything, and people that specialize or professional in these industries, they're going to help you, with great advice, but knowledge that they know all the tedious things, all the loopholes especially when it comes to taxes in your accounts, especially when it comes to property management. They know the laws. They know the laws, and they know how to, I guess, get the best out of your property when it comes to renovations and upgrading the property so you can get the right, rental return. And then it comes to your solicitor when you're purchasing that property, understanding all the clauses. And when it comes to, I guess, your finance, a broker that is well recognized in the field and understands the laws, and putting multiple offset accounts, or extracting equity to use for your next purchase, or how to pay down debt faster and quicker than your normal average broker or banker. So these things are very important when it comes to building a property portfolio. So
For sure.
this is something that you need to look out for. Like I said, there's no I in team. Because if you try to do everything yourself, you're not going to get the result you want. Because everyone out there, like I think Arnold Schwarzenegger had a quote saying, "There's no such thing as a self-made millionaire." And so to get the right result, like I can't rave on about this so much, because I see people, they try to do everything themselves. And being from, I guess, our Adrian and I both Italian heritage background, that's, I guess, the way we've been brought up. They try to do everything themselves. And really, if you're trying to do that, you're going to, use your time, and your time is more valuable than money. So why wouldn't you use money to, short track that time and get the result faster and quicker?
100%. And I think there's a reason why we put this first, okay? Because when we go into a region, and this is just what we do, what maybe a lot of other really good buyers agencies do and should be doing. When we go into a region, right, we want to have all these guys lined up straight away, okay? Because the last thing we want is going into a region, example, not having a solicitor in a particular region. If I go out, bang, I know my strategy, bang, I'm going to go buy a property, and you miss this part, you then have to rush around when it comes time to purchase. So let's use an example as a solicitor, right? I don't have a solicitor in a region, but then I've purchased a property. I've then got to rush around, right, before I can put in an offer, to find a solicitor, maybe off Google. Okay, I've got no rapport with them, no trust, don't know how they work, how quick their turnaround times are. Okay, and you're obviously not going to be prioritized. But I've got to go to them. Let's say I put an offer in on Thursday, or I'm going to put an offer in on Thursday. I need to go to them on the Thursday and say, "Hey, I've just about to put in an offer. Can you look over the contract? Can you put all these clauses in? And can you do all that?" And they might not get back to me to the Monday, the Tuesday. By that time, maybe the property's sold. By that time, maybe there's another 3 other offers, and I'm going to pay an extra $15,000 for the property. So there's an actual financial burden and a financial impact if you haven't got these people and these professionals around you before you even think about sourcing. Okay, you can do this together with sourcing, which is the next one. Number 3, sourcing. But you need to make sure that you have your team lined up, ready to go as you're going into the region. So, Frank, go through to number 3, which I just introduced, sourcing.
So sourcing, I guess, as buyers agents, I guess we get a lot of access to data and websites and programs that we pay for, of course, but that the general public don't have access to. So this helps us make an informed decision when it comes to analyzing a market. So analyzing and, I guess, finding property as well, which is a big thing. A lot of our properties that we do purchase, 70% of them are off-market purchases. So that comes down to, building those relationships with those real estate agents and property managers, and getting access to property that, I guess, that just aren't on realestate.com or Domain. I think this is really important. Now, when it comes to sourcing, I guess we want to start first with the location, because if we don't know where we're going to go, if we don't know that what area we've got to target, there's no point just buying a property anywhere without doing any DD. So we've got to make sure, okay, when it comes to sourcing, looking at information, looking at what's going on in a region. We talked about this in our other podcasts. I think in our episode, the one before this or the one before that age, I think episode 2 or 3, I forget which one it was.
Whatever one it was,
in the show notes. And we're talking about, looking at infrastructure projects, movement of people, job creation. things like that. What's going on? Vacancy rate, stock on market, a whole bunch of analysis tools. But then, of course, then when we go to a region, then we're going to start looking, okay, what's our goal? What's the sort of property we're looking out for? So if you've already put your plan in place, you've listened to the episode before this, and you got your plan, you know what house you're targeting, or if it's a duplex, block of units, commercial property, whatever it may be, you go into there and you start calling your agents, you start building rapport, and this is going to help you get access to more properties. So this is really, really important, because what you see on realestate.com is one thing, but what you see on the off market channel is another thing, and that's something that's your greatest weapon, because when it comes to the off market, sometimes it's only yourself purely in purchasing that property, or maybe there's one or two other buyers, compared to when it's on market. Maybe there's a few other people that are interested, and there might be 5 or 6 or 7 offers being put in at the table. So this is something to look out for. So you have to be very specific with these agents, that you're calling up, what you're looking out for, what exactly is the criteria. So giving them a brief, but it's really important to really, really just at least we call at least 40 agents per region, and we got access to a lot of agents. We've got all their emails, and we can flick them an email of our client's brief. So this is something, if you don't have access to, you have to do your due diligence, you have to do your sourcing, you have to really put in the effort. Call, send emails, and build that rapport. Once you do have a few people that maybe are really insightful, they'll give you a lot of gossip, or they'll give you a lot of properties that they might have access to. They're the people you want to be teaming up with. Okay, not the people that won't get back to you, not the people that just haven't, not really giving you much value. You want to team up with people that want to work with you as well. So this is something that's important, because if you can get access to those off-market properties, you're going to reap the reward.
For sure. And it's absolutely, not everyone has those tools that you've kind of touched on, but this is something that everyone can do, right? Getting on the phone, getting into re.com or domain, and just calling and building that relationship slowly. I mean, it's going to take time, much like creating your plan is going to take time. Your strategy, just like sourcing the right team, sourcing the properties and sourcing these agents is going to take time as well, which is, everyone has time. And if this is something serious you want to do out on your own, it's simply getting up and calling these agents. So beautiful. Awesome. Next one. I want to talk about due diligence. Okay. So I'm actually, I'm going to let you talk about due diligence, because you like to talk, and you're good at due diligence. So go for it.
I think this is something that a lot of people do not look at, and even buyer's agents as well, because I've had a client come to us, they've used a buyer's agent, and when I looked at the property they purchased, great location, not bad location of the actual area where they purchased, but the property itself, there's a lot of things that I started to ask, and when I done my DZ on that property, it was in a flood zone. Okay, so this is something that you really need to make sure when you get these properties presented to you by a real estate agent. They're not going to tell you everything, and they probably don't even know everything about the property or the location or where it is. So things that we look at that are vital: flood zoning, bushfire zoning, air flight path, building permit zoning, easements, and then as well doing a cash flow analysis, making sure the insurance policy is not through the roof, location, having a look where the property is situated. Now, if you've got an independent person that can go through the property, inspect the location, that in the location, that's going to help you as well. If you can do a bird's eye view using your Google Earth, having a look where the property is situated, if it's on a corner, main road, or maybe, there's a derelict house across the road, these things contribute to the value of your property. Because if you've got a derelict house across the road, what do you think that's going to do to your property value? If the house is run down, or if it's abandoned and there's, cars at the front, wrecked cars at the front, and there's rubbish all over the front. I've seen it before. That's going to push your prices down. It's going to make the street not look valuable. So making sure the street is beautiful, grasses are cut, houses are being upkept, and these things are improve the value of your street and of course your property as well. So these are something to really look out for, because if you're planning to do a development and you want to make sure that the building or the zoning of the property is in the right zoning, it's going to help you build that, that development that you're planning on doing, if it's a block of units or whatever it may be. This is something that you need to make sure that it's in the right zone capture. Flight paths, that's something that people don't take in consideration, because I guarantee you probably know someone that lives next to an airport or flight path, and you hear planes and they're very noisy going past. Now, that has an effect on your property prices as well. And all these things have something to do. Easements. If you want to build on a property and there's an easement, you can't build on top of that easement. So these things are, are taken into consideration. And I think, like I touched before, insurance policy is super crucial. I've been into regions. I've done my research, and before we start buying, I make sure I get a property in a location and I do an insurance policy check. I make sure that the insurance policy is not through the roof. We've been in regions for just a normal standard home. The insurance policy can be up to $2,500 plus a year, which is ridiculous. Once you start looking at your cash flow, it's getting stripped. So even do your cash flow analysis. Once you've got the property off the agent, make sure you ask for the rates, the water. You ask for the management fees or what they're charging if you're going to go for the same property management teams. Right? Make sure you calculate your interest per the year. Okay, make sure you're looking at, I guess, if there's any other repairs or anything that need to do to the property. If not, that's a bonus. But if there's something that you have to do, if there's flooring, you have to do some paint, factor that in. These are things to take into consideration. Even your insurance. Once you've done your analysis, you can give your cash flow analysis of what the property is going to put in your pocket after year one. Now, if you want a cash flow calculator, we do have that, and we'll put it in the show notes, and you can get that free tool that's going to help you when doing analysis. I think that's super important. People leave this out and they buy a property. Next thing they know, they haven't factored in all these expenses and the property is negative geared and it's costing them a significant amount of money. I do this for people. I actually show them if they've got a property or they're looking at purchasing a property. And I say, take this tool. I've done it with one client. And when they done the analysis, they were looking at buying an investment property in Melbourne. That property was actually going to cost them over $10,000 a year to hold. Freestanding home, but the property was significantly negative geared. So it's something just to take into consideration because you don't want to make a mistake. This is property. You're borrowing other people's money as well. So you want to make sure that property is going to grow in value and it's in a great location. It's going to attract the right tenant as well. So if there's anything else you want to touch on their age, but I think this is probably one of the most important parts of today's topic, DD.
For sure. Just a last little kind of tip, which you touched on very briefly, but I want to just a little side tip here. With every single property that we purchase, we have an external property manager run through that property. So there's obviously the sales agent. We then have an external property manager, not someone from the same company, run through that property to answer those questions. Like you said, is there a rough house across the road? Is the street very messy? They walk through the property. They've obviously got no vested interest in selling that property to us or to our client. So organising that something for yourself, if you can't physically get to that property. Now, obviously, we purchase properties all over Australia. And if you're a real true property investor, you should be diversifying and purchasing all over Australia as well. So you are going to need someone to run through there prior to putting in an offer. Property manager is an awesome way to go about it. As long as you need to come up with some agreement. It's not we don't pay for that property manager to go through. We have an agreement that if they go through the property, we will pass on the property management to them for our client. So there's no added fee, but it's all value. So something crucial, which is going to give you a lot of answers that maybe the agent isn't going to give you. So beautiful.
I just want to touch on one thing there as well, because the property manager is like the quarterback. You got to make sure you got the right property manager managing your property. Now we screen them, and it's like an interview. Now, people think that's crazy, but I want to make sure that the property manager is going to look after the property. They're going to be responsive, call you back, tell you if there's something wrong or if there's any, problems with the property, doing routine inspections frequently, and just giving you great advice if there's any upkeep so you can actually improve the quality of the property so the property, can add more value by increasing the rent and, of course, increasing the return of the equity of the position of the property as well. So it's just something that you sit there and ask a list of questions. Ask them if they're even an investor themselves. And then this is something to take into consideration because you're letting them look after your property and not just that they're inspecting the property on your behalf too. So the next step, we've got 5 is strategize and negotiating. I think I'll leave this to you, Adrian, because I know you like this part as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the time with property, a lot of people can just think that that person with the most money wins, and it's not. We've done an endless amount of videos, I think, Frank, and we've had our fair share of negotiations as well, either private or at auction. There's a few things that you need to make sure prior to actually even going into the negotiation. Okay, obviously you need to have a strategy. You need to do all those analysis. You need to make sure that if you pay X amount, it's still going to work out financially for you. So it's still going to put money in your pocket. It's still going to make sense to go through with it. But of course, you need to make sure that all your terms are in order. You need to really strip back the terms as much as possible, okay, where it still covers you, like I'm talking about settlement day terms, or if you're putting a due diligence clause or pest and building clause, try and strip that back as much as you possibly can. Of course, there's going to be things that you need to include. Settlement date terms, and clauses on finance, you need to get that all aligned. Everything needs to be aligned. Prior to you going in, asking the skilled questions to try and extract as much information from the agent as possible. Try to understand how many people are interested. Try to understand what the price points are. I know, Frank, I've heard you so many times say, what is it going to take to get the property over the line today? And I love that question. I really love that question. If you've ever listened to any of our other negotiation videos, an awesome thing, which maybe I should not throw out there, but something I always love to do, depending on if there's a few people or if I know that the agent, I know the agent, or I know the agent wants to get rid of the property and so does the vendor, is always kind of going back and saying, listen, we can't really stick around for too long here. Here's our offer. Here's when it expires. We are going to move on another property in the next few days. And obviously, you've got to be a bit careful with how you say that, depending on how many other interested parties. But if there is only one or two other interested parties, a great little tool to use. But yeah, make sure you've got your strategy when you go into negotiation. Make sure you know the final amount that you are going to head to. And then obviously, yes, ask the question and be human with it. Make sure it's a win-win as well. But yes, that's the negotiation.
I'll add a couple of things. I guess like you said, understanding. So ask a lot of questions. I think the more questions you ask, the better you're going to be better when you come to negotiating. Ask why is a vendor selling? What are the settlement terms? Is a vendor, flexible in settlement? What will it take to get over the line? Like Adrian said, that's a good, powerful question. I like to ask them. And I guess ask any other nitty-gritty questions that you need to ask. But this is important because the more information you can get out of the real estate agent, the better it is for you. Now, if there's someone, for instance, they're going for a divorce or it's a deceased estate, and they need that property sold ASAP, that gives you the upper hand now. Because then if there's not much interest in the property, then you can kind of be quite strategic on how you negotiate. But doing this as well, you've got to have a win-win situation. I think people go in there and just try to crush the other people and just get the best outcome for themselves. So you've got to have a level of, of respect. Integrity is super important, not just going in there and trying to destroy them. Because if you can get a win-win on both parties, it makes your life so much easier. Because what will happen is if you don't, and I've seen it before, if you don't, what will happen is, the vendor can get quite sour. Now, have a think about this. You buy a property, sign on the contract, they're both parties sign. They've agreed to your terms, conditions, whatever it may be. Let's say in some states, if something comes up on the pest and building, by law, they don't have to do anything to the property. They can just say, take it or leave it. They're not going to reduce the price. They don't have to do the repairs, nothing like that. Now, if you've been quite unflexible and you haven't been flexible enough and you haven't been respectful and, or like I said before, what's going to happen is, are they going to reduce the price? Are they going to do the repairs? Are they going to be flexible? 9 times out of 10, they're not. So if you do the right thing, you'll get the right result as well. So it's having a win-win situation. Now, I don't think, I think the old traditional way of just trying to get the best thing for you no longer exists in this world, because I guess we're living in a different day and age. So if you can actually do the right thing, you will reap the reward.
It's a very good point you make there, Frank, because, people think at the end of the show's over. There's nothing else to be done once you've negotiated and secured the property. It's not true at all. You've got 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days where you're still dealing with that vendor and still dealing with actually securing the property. The property's not secured until settlement day, essentially. So it's a really, really good point. Really good point that you made. All right, let's get on to the last one. The final one, secure plus the due diligence, which is what we just said. So this is the period from when both parties have signed the contract to the day that you settle. So like I said, 30, 60, 90, 120, whatever the amount of days are, this is this part here. Go for it.
So I guess once you've signed, both parties have accepted. Now, depending on your clauses, so if you've got a 21-day pest and building and finance, if not, you've got a 14 days, or if you've got no days on your finance, depending on your situation. But let's just say you got a clause in, you got to move fast. So you've got to organise a pest and building report. So call up your pest and builder, get that organised right away. Now, don't get them to do it on the day before when the clause is due. Do it at least a week or two before the clause is due. You get that report. If there's any problems, then you can start negotiating on price or if they're going to fix the property, etc. As well, once you've settled on the contract or both parties have signed, get your rental appraisal from the agent as well and get the hard copy or the digital copy, send it off to your broker. Something important so the broker knows, okay, you've purchased the property, let's get the finance in order and start moving. Now, during this period, of course, you notify as well your solicitor. Solicitor is going to get everything in order. Moving forward, they'll give you the key dates of when everything is due. So make sure they give you a date of when the initial deposit is due, when your pest and building, or if you've got any other clauses are due, your finances when it's due, cooling off period when it's due, when settlement is due. Now, so you know exactly. Factor that into your calendar, write it all down. So you know, okay, pest and building is due on this day, settlement's due on this day, I have to pay my last deposit on this day, etc. Super, super important. Now, something that what people don't do, let's say you get a pest and building report done and there's some repairs. Now, let's say hypothetically the vendor said, I'm going to do these repairs. They go out, they do the repairs. Now, what happens is 9 times out of 10, people don't check the property. And what will happen is some of these vendors won't do the right thing. So you organize a pre-inspection. Now, if there was a lot of repairs where I guess a property manager maybe can't do, so if maybe it's something in the roof or something when it comes to construction of the property, now you might have to get the pest and building specialists that you booked in for the original first inspection. They go back in there and actually have a look to make sure they've done the repairs correctly. Now, it's something important. And so doing that, if they haven't, then you can go back to your solicitor and say, listen, they haven't done the repairs. Let's go back to the vendor's solicitor and put it, write up a report. Now we do that. Now they will go back. They'll probably do the repairs. If not, maybe there's going to be some dramas in between. But let's just say hypothetically they go back, they do the repairs, get another inspection done. They've done everything. Now it might cost you to get the pest and building specialist to go back out there and do a second or maybe a third inspection. Okay, but of course, it's not going to be as much as the first inspection. So it's something to take in consideration, because imagine if you don't. Let's say it's a couple $100 for the second inspection, but there's $6,000 worth of damage or repairs, I should say, not damage. Okay, that $200 is going to save you $6,000. So you don't look at it from I'm wasting money. Look at it as you're saving money. Now, what I like to tell clients, let's say there's not much work involved at all, and let's say there wasn't any work at all when you purchased the property. I organize a pre-inspection. So a week before settlement, I get my property manager to go through the property, inspect the property, do a report on the property, take photos, videos, record, and tell me if there's anything that stands out. Now, let's say the house is already tenanted and maybe they haven't, cleaned the property. Maybe there's further damages. Maybe something has happened, a broken window or something. There's always something that will happen. Doing a pre-inspection will, quickly resolve these things. So once you've done an inspection, they've taken some photos and evidence, you can actually go back to your solicitor and they can pass it on to the vendor solicitor. So that's a week before. So pre-inspection, make sure you put that in a week before you settle on the property. Because if there's something that's come up and unexpectedly, you want to make sure that you're not going to be left with those damages or those faults. So that this is something that you get all your professionals in line. Send everything out to all of them, to your broker, to your conveyancer, of course, your pest and building specialist, and to your property manager as well. Okay, this is super important because, it can cost you thousands. And I remember with my first property, the vendor promised they were going to do these repairs and, some of this cleanup work that was around the property. What happens? They didn't. I didn't get a second pest and building inspection or a pre-inspection report. What happened? I got left with those charges. So the first year cost me over $6,000 just to do these maintenance fees. And that's something I didn't want to pay for. The vendor, of course, was going to do. But look, this is where you live and learn. And so I try to help people by giving them this information so they don't make the same mistakes moving forward.
For sure. I think last and final one is if the property you're able to claim depreciation on that property. The final thing, obviously, once you settle, once everything's gone through, organising a specialist, depreciation specialist, to go out there, pay the fee, do the report, and then claim back tax or get your tax rebate at the time of tax return. So that's kind of your last profession. But I think that's that, Frank. That's the 6. I want to kind of just run through it again, just to summarise. So first step would be to listen to last week's episode. That's a little plug there. The most important step to anything, prior to even thinking about property, is getting your strategy in place. Okay, that's absolutely the most important thing. Right, that's number 1. Number 2, getting that team around you. Getting that team around you before you go in. I think I gave an example. Not having a solicitor in a region yet, but then purchasing a property and then having to get all the stuff sorted, get the contract reviewed, get the clauses in. That can cost you tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, because it means someone else might jump in the way, or you might be forced to pay extra money for the property. So getting your team sorted before you go into a region. Then obviously going into a region, okay? Sourcing the region and then sourcing the agents. Calling these agents. It's going to take time. That's okay. Everyone's got time. Calling these agents and getting as much access to as much property. If you get off-market stuff, awesome, but building that rapport with those agents. 4th, due diligence. Like you touched on, Frank, your flood zones, your building permits, your easements, putting together a cash flow analysis of what the property is going to cost, your insurance, really doing due diligence on the property and making sure that it stacks up. My favorite, the strategize and negotiate part. Very simple, making sure everything's aligned. You know exactly what you're going in with, and then trying to extract as much information as you can. And then the final part, in between when you secure it to when the property is actually in your name, the due diligence there, making sure all the professionals are across everything. You're doing all your pre-settlement inspections. You're getting the pest and building inspector out there. That is absolutely it. Have I missed anything, Frank, or are we good to sign off?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. So if you go back, if you want to listen to this episode again, you get more information, more value every time you go back and you listen to it, because there'll be other golden nuggets that will capture, what we've just spoken about. So you'll get a lot of information here. I think this is something that 99% of Australian investors don't do. That's why, 99.6% of Australian investors don't own more than 3 investment properties. And it's because I don't think they do. I'm pretty certain they don't do all these strategic tips that we give out to our viewers and listeners as well. So go back, listen to it. You'll extract so much more value and use this, implement this, and you will reap the reward. I guarantee.
For sure. Now, next episode, our first ever guest, which I'm very excited about. So, little plug, tune in to the next episode. It is our first ever guest who brings a wealth of knowledge. So you can now enjoy it more, because you don't have to hear Frank and I talking rubbish anymore. So you can listen to now someone who's going to come on. He's really a wealth of knowledge, someone who's had a massive impact on both of our lives, on our business. So very excited. We've got a few guests, very cool guests coming on in the next few weeks. So, all right. Thank you, Frank. Beautiful session. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you soon.
Ciao.
If you like today's podcast, then you're absolutely going to love the Invest in You Facebook group, where we share a bunch of valuable tips and tricks on property investing for our exclusive community. Come join us and let's level up.